New generation Monster Hunter sucks. Just kidding. But while playing the most recent title in the series, Monster Hunter Wilds, I've come to realize that Monster Hunter is no longer the same enjoyable experience I used to love back when I was introduced to the series with Monster Hunter Tri on the Nintendo Wii. Don't get me wrong, I still love this series and actually believe Wilds is extremely enjoyable and does have the potential to be the best game in the series. That said, ever since Monster Hunter World, Capcom abandoned what made Monster Hunter my favorite game series, and I want to prove why by breaking down to 3 different categories: gameplay, content, and overall experience. Let's start with the gameplay. There's no doubt that since Monster Hunter World, the fluidity of each individual weapon has improved significantly, like buzzsawing down monsters with the dual blades, or how satisfying it feels countering every incoming attack with the longsword. And that's just a few of the many improvements they have implemented to all 14 weapons. It's fair to say that Monster Hunter has come a long way from the much slower and clunkier gameplay of the older titles. But those amazing weapon improvements that I love so much generated an unexpected issue. The player is too overpowered. And this is extremely prevalent in Monster Hunter Wilds, with every weapon being able to perfect guard, perfect evade, or offset with not so perfect timing. It's never been easier to completely steamroll monsters. Let's take a look at how OP this is. Making this no armor challenge run I just did in Wilds, link in the description, extremely easy. Every hunt feels like you're the raid boss instead of the monster, completely diminishing the intimidation and enjoyment of a monster that is 10 times the player size. That's not even beginning to mention the fact that several of these weapons also have counters and other mechanics such as focus strikes that have guaranteed the monster to flinch. I hope you're beginning to see what I'm trying to point out here. But let's compare that to old gen Monster Hunter, where admittedly the weapons don't feel as smooth, making the learning curve much more steep on the player. It's much more fun in my personal experience to learn your weapon's strengths and weaknesses and implementing that into the hunt, where you're constantly making decisions on when to be aggressive or defensive, making taking down a monster that much more satisfying. Although I will say taking down a monster for the first time is satisfying in both games, the feeling quickly disappears in newer titles, whereas older titles the feeling actually grows the more you hunt down even the same monster, as there's much more room to improve as you adapt and learn to become more aggressive during a hunt, which is much more gratifying to the player. This feeling just doesn't exist nowhere near the same level, partly due to the overpowered weapon mechanics, but also because of the new improved monster AI in newer titles. As mentioned, older titles offer more opportunity to improve the more you hunt down a monster. To an inexperienced player, this just looks like a Barioth is doing a random attack, but as an experienced player, I can tell you it's going to chomp forward and I can step to the side of its wing for a guaranteed opening. And that's the beauty of having scripted attack patterns on monsters. On first encounters, the monster feels fresh, new, and random, but as you master the hunt, you start to memorize patterns and find new openings to take down monsters you previously struggled on. Here's that exact same attack pattern on Barioth in newer titles, and I couldn't find any consistency in the monster's AI despite replaying the scenario exactly the same, completely taking away that mastery feeling that once made the game so enjoyable to me. Last thing to mention in terms of gameplay for me is the utilization of items and skills. Prepping for the hunt used to be an essential core mechanic in Monster Hunter, rewarding players for their knowledge. Like the importance of sonic bombs when hunting down Diablos, and also knowing that they become ineffective as soon as Diablos is enraged. Except in Monster Hunter World, where sonic bombs work no matter what, because why not? But the worst offense is the reduction in effectiveness of skills. Skills like evasion and earplugs had purpose, like in this example, Rathalos roars were unavoidable without either skill. But here I am in Wilds rolling straight through it without any earplugs or evasion. It comes to a point of why even have them implemented in the game. I wish Capcom would regress a little bit, at least in this aspect, to bring back purpose to prepping in both armor skills and items. Again, as it used to be a core mechanic that made Monster Hunter fun, at least to me. Just to recap on my major points on gameplay. 1. Players being too overpowered changes the power dynamic during a hunt between the player and the monster. 2. Randomized AI diminishes the ability and the experience of mastering the game. And 3. Preparation for a hunt is much less significant, decreasing the impact of items and skills. With that, let's move on to my second major complaint, the content. I'll start off by saying I'm fully aware Wilds is still actively releasing content, but remember, these complaints goes for all new gen titles as well. Point number 1. The monster roster is way too small on release. Monster Hunter World released with 30 large monsters. Note, that's a 63 count drop from the previous title, but it was a reboot to the series, so I'll give it a pass. Monster Hunter Rise bumped it up to a 37 count on release, and Monster Hunter Wilds released with 29 monsters. And don't forget, Guardian Arkfield and Zoshia are unavailable to rehunt on release, so the count was actually more like 27. Like, what the hell happened, Capcom? Some of you may think I'm stretching with this complaint, but let's not forget these are full price games. Let's compare that to old gen titles. As you can see, there's a steady increase in roster size. Even the jump from Monster Hunter 3 Ultimate, a G-rank game, to Monster Hunter 4, a high rank game, the monster count remained the same at 52. And yes, Monster Hunter 4, the same game where Capcom implemented a new verticality mechanic and 2 new weapons, which are still the 2 newest weapons in the series. I was being generous. If we did that same comparison in new gen, for Monster Hunter Sunbreak with 78 large monsters is nearing triple the roster size of Wilds. Now listen, I understand Capcom puts more quality time into designing every monster, whereas it was a bit easier to do it in previous generations. But if that's the case, I'd much rather they delay the release of the game to grow the roster size of the monsters in my Monster Hunter game. I'm not alone in saying Monster Hunter Wilds fell incredibly short for a Monster Hunter title. That's problematic for a series that was known to be able to sink hundreds if not thousands of hours into. But the initial roster release isn't the only content issue Monster Hunter suffers from now. Which brings me up to point number 2, which is quest variety. There's a lot of ways to be able to stretch the limited content out as much as possible. Let me explain. Looking at strictly quest count, Monster Hunter Generations Ultimate had over 1,000 quests, which is more than World, Rise, and Sunbreak combined. Now, I will say 1,000 is absurd, but taking some aspects of that would make the games feel much more complete, such as multi-monster quest. Although Sunbreak did implement quests like these, Wilds does not, especially since the game is quote-unquote open world, which I believe is a BS claim, but that's a different topic. Wilds only really allows 2 monsters to appear in a quest together, which is ridiculously lame, but even worse, they're completely random and also have a quest limit. Multi-monster quests add a new level of challenge aside from boosted HP and boosted damage, which Capcom loves doing. Like this quest in GU that has you taking on 5 hyper monsters locked up in the arena. Capcom also needs to bring back more fun quests, such as gigantic or midget monsters. The last recall I have of them doing something like this was the Greatest Jogress in Monster Hunter World. Or even better, like this Savage Devil Joe hunt where you're not allowed to wear any armor. And yes, this is a real thing. Like, do these quests not sound like so much fun? But more importantly, just making quest variety like this stretches out what you can do with the limited monster roster and gives the player more reasons to keep playing. And my last point is endgame content has always sucked balls, but it sucks so much more balls since World. I've always disapproved of unsatisfying RNG rolls such as perfect talismans in old gen, the best 5 decorations in World, Quarrier rolls in Rise, or even the whack table system for optimal rolls for Ardean weapons. It's not fun, it will never be fun, just give players a grindy method to get exactly what they want every time. But why does endgame content suck more in newer titles? I'll tell you why. It's because it pushes you straight into it. I remember when I was first playing Monster Hunter World in 2018 on release, blitzing through the game as I usually did, having this expectation that the storyline finish where you slay Zonojiva was just the beginning of the good shit that Monster Hunter has to offer. Nope, I was so wrong, and the game immediately starts making you hunt tempered monsters that provide absolute no value except decoration farming. Let's compare that to Generations Ultimate, where after you beat Al-Laka, the final boss of the game, you unlock the ability to hunt a Canator, Ukanalos, Narkarkos, Alatrion, Amatsu, Fatalis, Crimson Fatalis, White Fatalis, all with individual amazing gear to grind for. Oh my god, this game is so fucking good. But no, my friend, that's not even the end of it. You are now allowed to take on hyper monsters that allow you to take all your precious gear to the final endgame level while allowing you to find new talismans alongside with it. Need more to do? Don't worry, you can take on each individual deviant monster and prove that you mastered the game by taking on each individual EX monster, which are some of the hardest hunts the series has ever offered. And you get a badass badge next to your name to prove that you're him. All of this before the game is watered down to just a mindless RNG grind. So can you really blame me for being disappointed back in 2018? The saddest part is they repeatedly make the same issues. Monster Hunter Rise, you couldn't even fight the true final boss until a month later after release. Wilds, same exact problem. Man, DLC sucks. Give me my full game price upfront like they used to, damn it. I'm starting to sound like an old man now. But seriously, how is my $40 3DS game provide more entertainment than my 2 $60 games do now? That's not even mentioning I have to wait a year or 2 for it to be considered complete. With that being said, let's move on to the last major topic, experience. Let's talk quality of life. I'll keep it a bug. There are so many quality of life changes since World, like radial menus, fast travel, secrets, just to name a few that make the game so much more enjoyable. But with Wilds, I think they're taking it a bit too far. You might be wondering what I mean by this. I'm talking about how ridiculously easy it is to obtain monster materials. Speaking from experience, it can be extremely discouraging to repeatedly hunt something and never get that low percent drop. I'm looking at you, Rathos Plates. If you know, you know. But when it's given to you so easily, it's not as rewarding and it removes the entire experience of what it means to grind for better gear. I would actually say World has the perfect balance of grind versus achievable. But what makes it worse is that these games don't even require the player to sever monster tails to actually get tails. They're sacrificing logic and tactical play just to make it easy for players. I get that it helps the game more accessible, but I believe it's crossing the line of being too accessible. Being prepared and equipping the correct weapon depending on what monster parts you needed and actually working for key upgrades are both extremely satisfying feelings that reward the experience that I would say is slowly but surely being diminished in newer titles. But let's move on to why gear hardly even matters in new gen titles. I have 2 separate uploads on my channel completing a no armor run in both Rise and Wilds. This alone should prove how meaningless gear can actually be in the newer titles. Even in Monster Hunter World, once you reach Master Rank, spend 30 minutes crafting the bone armor and you're good to go until the end of the game. Yes, the very last few endgame hunts in these games can be very punishing and difficult, but that doesn't mean the majority 80% should be so easy that armor upgrades are more about min-maxing than a necessity. Newer titles never introduce any monsters along the way that cause a blockade for people. The best example I can give is Kushala in Freedom Unite. If you don't have a build with wind pressure, a poison weapon, or flash bombs, you're going to have a miserable time, forcing players to slow down, go back, and figure out how to counter the monster with armor skills, or actual just skill. I will say, I understand I am a bit biased on this end. I've been playing the series since I was 12, so I'm going to be much better than the average player. But still, if I attempted this on any older title, I would struggle infinitely more, which is how it should be. The ramp up is way too slow, as we can tell with WoW, since Capcom has been releasing 8 stars and now 9 star quests to compensate what should have been there from the beginning. But forget every single point I made before this. This final point I'm going to make is my biggest complaint. Monster Hunter is at its most fun being in a party taking down monsters with friends. The problem is a lot of people, myself included, have no friends. But especially since World, I have not made a single friend online in Monster Hunter. I just hop on a single player lobby, hunt by myself, because due to HP scaling, hunts will always go by quicker solo, which was not the case in older titles, which again, is a good thing. People should be encouraged to party up or enjoy the extra challenge of taking on a monster solo that is made to be hunted by a party of 4. But even if I do hop on an online lobby, players can be spread across 6 different areas, or even more likely, people are just responding to SOS signals, meaning they join the quest, hunt the monster down, and you'll likely never see them again. I love being locked in a lobby with 4 players hunting together for an hour to several hours and being able to do it again tomorrow. However, removing all of these features I just talked about would probably not be for the best. So how can Capcom fix it? Well, I recently played through Monster Hunter Frontier for the first time, and I love the MMO aspect of throwing 50 players into one single lobby, all within the same hub. And it's even better when there's a Ravientia Siege live because everyone is cooperating with each other. So doing something like that would be awesome. Stop limiting quests to 4 players. Siege quests are a great way for that, but I'm sure Capcom can figure out new creative ways to encourage players to actively cooperate. Overall, Monster Hunter as a series is an uneasy state for me. I love how fun and easy it is to pick up the game and enjoy it from time to time, but I find myself getting bored because there's nothing to hold my attention, especially once I'm finished with the game. No challenge, no meaningful content, and no friends. Then when I play an older title, I have plenty to do, but nobody to do it with, so I'm still bored. But with that said, Capcom is doing a fine job with this series. This was just my input on what would make a good game into an amazing one. Let me know what you guys think. Do you agree or do you disagree? And tell me why. I love having a discussion with you guys in the comments. And also make sure to like and subscribe, as I have even more Monster Hunter content planned for the channel, just like these 2 other videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys very, very soon.